Language literacy and numeracy, or LLN, is interchangeable with this other phrase that you're hearing about, these core skills, okay? So let's just focus on the National Quality Council's definition of language literacy and numeracy. Okay, the skills to communicate in oral and written form, including reading and the use of written information, the ability to write appropriately and in a range of contexts, the integration of speaking, listening, and critical thinking. So not just speaking and listening, but being able to think critically about what's being spoken about and what's being heard with the reading and the writing skills. And this is where this interchanges with the different core skill levels. So a functional level, there is some critical thinking going on, and when it's a low level, it's very limited, and the processing of what is being recognised and the meaning of that word, and then judgments behind it. So, you know, we'll certainly flesh that out a lot more for you. So it's that third point, integration of speaking and listening with the reading and the writing, okay, but that extra element of the critical thinking skills, being able to process that information, break it down, apply it to new situations, think about how that's affected previous knowledge, and making some judgments on whether that information is, is believable, or whether that needs further investigation. And finally, recognition of the use of numbers and basic mathematical signs and symbols within the text. So language is about words. It's verbal. It has grammatical structures. So English, in particular, has very complex grammatical rules, certainly compared to other languages. And language is also understanding gestures. So, you know, it's a very cultural thing. Certain body language gestures in some cultures are very different in their meaning to other body language gestures. So it's not just words, it's body language as well. And all of this together, the grammatical structures of the words, the body language, it all comes together to create a meaning. And obviously then there's going to be cultural factors around understanding those meanings as well. Literacy is different from language, which has a more cultural meaning aspect. Literacy is the ability to read, and in English, the language is English. So to read English, to use the written information, and to be able to write it. So it's reading and writing, and that using written information ties in again with that critical thinking. So literacy is reading and writing and using that information in an appropriate manner at home and work and in the community. So this is again where the levels of literacy are being fleshed out here, using them in an appropriate manner, okay, in a way that you can function at work and outside of the workplace. So literacy enables us to interact with each other to achieve purposes. You know, literacy with your reading and your writing means that you can be explaining information. You can debate issues and ideas. You can retrieve information. You can inform others. You can explore issues and figure out what you would like to learn more about. Literacy is also a great form of entertainment, reading for pleasure, communicating socially with people for pleasure, and also for creating. And this is where we're looking at innovation in the workplace to stay competitive in the globalised society. And there's a difference between functional literacy and critical literacy. So functional literacy is your basic reading and writing. So that's being able to follow instructions, to fill in forms, examples, reading a bus timetable, writing a note. And that's more your level 3, your functional literacy. But then you're moving into level 4 and level 5, and we'll flesh out more of these core skills and levels in a moment. But your higher order thinking, your critical thinking, is when you get the ability to question texts, as I was saying. So how believable is this? You know, what judgment am I going to make about this? Is this a good enough quality? Is this sufficient, or do I need to learn more about this? So that's when you're applying your higher order thinking. You know, even things like, how can I use this new information to create something new? Or how can I apply this to what my job is in the workplace? Or use this to make my life better at home? So, language literacy and numeracy and core skills, two very interchangeable terms in VET. The Australian core skills framework has created what they call 5 core language literacy and numeracy skills, and I think you've just seen a clip more about those core skills. So this is just a quick little bit of revision: learning, reading, writing, oral communication and numeracy. So there's some questions below, and this little review on those core skills, coupled with the previous YouTube, will help you answer these questions. So just to review, learning can be defined as applying skills to gaining new skills or knowledge, or improving past learning. So something to that effect in the answer would be satisfactory. Reading. So reading is about making meaning from texts or text types. And texts range between reading the newspaper. A newspaper is a text. A novel is a text. If you go to training, you might see text which is a PowerPoint presentation, or hard copy handouts is a text. Texts in the workplace would be policy manuals, standard operating procedures are texts. Even safety signs with words on there are texts. Okay, business cards are texts. Okay, so you're getting the idea of what text types are. And being able to make meaning from this. And people take this for granted, but people with low core skills aren't able to make meaning from the words on a business card, aren't able to make meaning from a safety procedure, and this is alarming in the workplace. So reading is also about an awareness of the author's purpose. So this is where we're getting up into the higher levels. They have to understand the purpose of that text in the first place. So a safety sign, the purpose of the safety sign is to protect you from walking in that area of a forklift, perhaps. It's also, on the higher levels, making people aware of the intended audience for that text. And this is where the critical thinking comes into it. You know, is there a bias there? Should I believe what I'm reading? Who was this actually written for? You know, is it relevant for me? Can I skim over this information if it isn't relevant to me right now? And they need an awareness of their own purposes for reading. So I guess that ties into the relevancy I was just talking about. So my purpose is I need to skim down here to the bottom to find out on this worksheet the deadline I have before I have to pick and pack this order in the workplace. So, you know, here's all the information about the client's address. Yeah, well, I don't need that. I just need to look down to the right-hand corner and find out how many cartons I need to pack and by what date. So that's part of reading. And you need to have strategies for making meaning. So basically, anybody that's been through the school system and has able to acquire their school leaving certificate, which varies in different Australian states, if they can satisfactorily make meaning from what they're reading, you know, they've actually been able to pass. But there's a lot of people that can't make that meaning from texts. And obviously they would be at a level under that level 3. So what would you put in your answer? I would just be putting something to the effect of making meaning from different texts. You might want to just give yourself an example. For example, a newspaper or a standard operating procedure perhaps. But making meaning from different text types would be satisfactory. Here's an example of a text type. We have a sign, so unless you understand the graphics of that sign, you would need to be able to read the word dangerous goods. Now, can you imagine a worker in the workplace dabbling around dangerous goods and not being able to read that sign? This is where it becomes alarming. So there's the core skill of writing, the ability to shape written language according to purpose, audience, and text. Okay, so a worker in the workplace writing needs to be writing for a purpose. So this man here is obviously a supervisor, and he's providing he's informing his audience, which is the staff that work for him, about the current performance levels. So his purpose is to inform his staff about the latest performance that's been measured. Did they pick and pack the boxes by the deadline, perhaps? Okay, and the context is in the workplace. Okay, so the circumstance or the situation is that it's workplace writing. Okay, as opposed to being at home, a context might be writing a letter to a friend on an email. Okay, so the purpose of that is just to make some personal contact and, reach out and say hi. And the audience is a more informal audience. It's a close friend. So the language choices that you might make writing to that friend could be very different to this man here who needs to have a more formalised approach. So, where you might get a little bit cheeky and naughty writing to a friend on an email, obviously he has to, keep a pretty high level of decorum and just stick to the facts when he's writing in this workplace context. Now, another core skill there is oral communication. So all you would need to do to answer that question is to say the social exchange of speaking and listening. So this is all about your interaction with other people. So you guys can just write the social exchange of speaking and listening, and that would be sufficient. So look, there's lots of transactions in the workplace where you have to interact with people, okay? So giving and receiving goods and services. So there's customer service with clients, there's speaking with people in your team, okay? So it's very interpersonal. You're establishing a relationship, and it might be just an instant relationship beginning and ending in that moment. All right, you may never see that client again, but you need to be able to speak to them. You need to be able to listen to them and interpret the meaning of what's going on. Or you might need to maintain an ongoing relationship. So there's different levels of that oral communication, that speaking and listening, to be able to successfully not just maintain a relationship with a client or someone there at work, but to actually enhance that and create a level of trust and reliability. So here you can see in the workplace, this is the speaking and listening, the exchange of speaking and listening going on. So these guys are looking at a text. They're obviously having to read that text and orally communicate, speak about that text. So here's an example of where it really isn't functioning in the workplace, okay? This worker is probably performing under a level 3 because, there isn't a satisfactory result here. So there's a group celebrating a birthday and they ring up and order a table for 8 people at 6 p.m. So the employee has listened to what was being spoken. She didn't really process that information effectively. It was a table for 8 at 6. right? Perhaps there was a problem with what was being spoken. Perhaps that person needed to be more explicit and say a table for 8 people at 6 o'clock p.m. All right? So that's perhaps where the communication broke down. So they needed a table for 8 people at 6 p.m. prior to attending a show. But they arrive at the restaurant to find that the booking under their name is for 6 people at 8 p.m. So here they are at 6 o'clock and there's no table available for them till 8 o'clock. They're going to miss the show. All right? Now, was it the employee that didn't hear the information? Perhaps there was an issue where she's mixed up the information there. Did she or he write it down? Was there a process there when they answer the phone call at work? Is there a formal process that their boss expects that they're going to actually write in the booking, 8 people, 6 p.m.? Did she just take it and was she busy? Was it a procedural thing, or has this person got low levels of oral communication? So the numeracy question, all you'd need for a satisfactory answer is applying mathematics to make sense of the world and for social purpose. That's the answer that we need. But let's look at mathematics. So people learn mathematics at school, but there's a massive transference of how they understood symbols and meaning and applications in a school system in very generic contexts, and how you would actually move that into the workplace. So this example is about Toby's hairdressing. So Toby says to Paul's the new apprentice there, mix the bleach 2 to 3 for these foils, Paul. And Paul says, oh, what are you talking about? And so Toby has to explain, it's 2 parts bleach to 3 parts base cream. So that's 5 parts altogether. And then Paul realises from school, oh, that's fractions from school. It's 2/5 bleach to 3/5 base cream. So there is this transference of meaning, especially with young people that are used to, mathematical concepts in a school system. Here's some other examples of numeracy in the workplace. Employees need to be able to read meters and measures and be able to correctly perhaps put them down in a report or a form. They need to be able to apply critical thinking. Is this meter running too high? They need to make a judgment, and then they have to recall, what is the process? If this is running too hot or too high, what do I need to do? Do I need to alert the client? Do I need to alert my boss, my teammates? What happens in this situation? So in review, you've got your 5 core skills, and this was an earlier question that I tried to see if you could answer just from that previous YouTube, but if not, you can just go back now. The 5 core skills are learning, reading, writing, oral communication, and numeracy.